Welcome to the Nexus Unloaded podcast. This is Will Crozier.
And I'm Nikki Westcombe. We are the founders of Nexus Performance. Joining us on this wild ride is our heavyweight coaching team, ready to unleash their expertise to solve any problems in your journey to getting strong and jacked.
Through our real-world experience, we hope to break things down in a digestible, applicable, and entertaining way.
So pump up the volume and let's get into this.
We're back on. We're talking bed sheets here.
We're talking bed sheets. All right. So, as I guess you'd call myself a bachelor, as a young bachelor in this world, I have been someone who honestly does not give a fuck about my bed sheets. Like, in terms, like they're clean all the time. Like I clean them like once a week.
I'd hope so.
Yeah. So we're not dirty. But I used to just go to Kmart. Yep. Cheap.
Sure.
But I had like a really nice set that I bought 18 months ago or something when I was in a relationship. Kind of, when you got a missus, they want nice sheets.
Got to uphold the standard.
Yeah, so I bought a pair and I was like, oh, these are pretty nice. Like it's a bit different from the Kmart variety that I'm used to. A lot more expensive. And then anyway, so they've had their well use. And I was sitting there the other day and I was just walking past Pillow Talk at Robina and I was just like, oh, you know what? Go and have a look. And I walked in because they normally have sales and I must have missed every sale they have because I walked in and there's no sales on.
They're usually one of those stores that have sale signs up.
It's like an EB Games version of it's like the homewares of EB Games.
Yeah.
And I walk in there and I don't know if you've ever seen the meme of if you want to find a missus, go look confused in the Lululemon. So I walked into Pillow Talk and I was like, so lost, bro.
Yeah.
I had this place. I walked in and I was just like, what am I doing? I had a fair idea what I wanted in terms of sheets. I'd done some research online.
Okay.
But I'm someone who can't buy online because when I spend money, it needs to be there and then. I need the product straight away.
Yep.
I hate buying online.
That's a very male thing.
I just hate it. I don't like it. I need something there and then, something I can grasp. And anyways, I walked in and I was just like, fuck, what am I doing? Anyways, this older lady pops her head out, your typical mum status. She's like, you need help, don't you? I was like, yes, please, please. I was like, okay, I'm a sweaty boy when I sleep, so I think I need bamboo sheets. It's like, yeah, perfect, straight over to these ones. Which color do you want? Grab the color I like because I've got the same color sheets at home anyway, and I just want the exact same ones. Sand colored sheets, white doona. Perfect. It's like, oh, do you want a different color? Because you've got, no. Sand colored sheets. Thank you. Had to get I wanted a new mattress protector as well because I wanted a bamboo one, make it a little bit cooler because my bed is quite hot.
If you're a sweaty boy as well, you definitely want that mattress
just a furnace,
protector.
Yeah. I had one on there, but I just needed a new one that was the bamboo. Apparently, it keeps you cooler. I don't know. Anyways, and then she just started handing me this stuff. I was like, this chick saw me coming from a mile away.
Yep.
Didn't even let me have a look at prices. So I was flipping things over, trying to look at prices. It's like, no, just this is the price for the members and you can join for free at the front. And I was just like, all right, done, let's go. I walk up, grab the doona cover, walk back over to the register, put everything through. She signs me up. She's like, oh, okay, so that's $5.25. Oof. I was like, fuck, what is this? It's like, oh, that's okay though, because you joined as a member today. It's come down to $4.06. What a bargain. And I was just like, not exactly what I would consider a bargain.
What did you have in mind going in there? How much were you willing to spend?
I don't know, $250, $300.
It's not cheap to invest in bed stuff if you want
which
quality.
I would have been pretty close if I didn't add the bamboo mattress protector. So if I just got the sheet sets, I would have been pretty close to what I was expecting. And it was at the point where I was just like, I'm already there. Don't care. I didn't even really care about the price because I was just like, whatever, just give it to me. Anyways, I was like, fuck, okay, that was pretty expensive, but whatever. I went home and I put them on the bed. Bro,
best sleep of your life.
Best thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
So if you're a male out there like myself, like Alex, bachelors, do yourself a favor. Go buy yourself some bamboo bed sheets.
Yep.
And treat yourself because it is amazing. It's like sleeping on silk.
We're talking amazing powerlifting tips here on the podcast today.
Yeah, well, you got to be comfortable with the CPAP.
We know that. We know sleep is king.
Yeah, sleep recovery.
If you don't get a good night's sleep,
Yeah.
That can affect your training.
Yeah, and I think we talk sleep hygiene and things like that and creating a good bedtime routine and like going to sleep effectively and things like that.
Yeah.
If you got some mint sheets that like keep you cool through the night and you're just like, I felt like a king. I honestly did. Samuel kept trying to sneak up and I was like, get off. No.
He'll ruin that quickly.
Yeah. And
so
little
invest
rat dog.
in good bed sheets, add 5% to your total. Are we going to call that out? We're going to say that?
Let's wait until after comp.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that one.
But we do have a topic for today.
We do have a topic. We're talking program hopping.
Yes.
So that's quite...
Before we get into that.
It's just something common, though, that we do have a lot in the gym. But, yeah, we do have a couple of announcements. We got Mum and Dad back next week.
By the time this podcast comes out, they'll probably be back already.
They will be back already.
Yeah.
We obviously have our Townsville Novice Comp, 18th
Northern
November.
Novice. Yep.
Northern Novice. We've actually got a couple of sponsor shout-outs for that event. Our major sponsor this year is ASN, Australian Sports Nutrition. Major sponsor for the event. The team will be set up at the event for all your supplement needs. Have a chat to Rohan, Laura, and the team, and keep your eyes peeled for what goodies they have available on the day. Our supporting sponsor, City Cave in
Idalia.
Thank you. Yep. Couldn't pronounce that one. For helping our athletes relax and recover, especially in those final weeks of prep where things start to get really tough. Go in and see the team at City Cave
Idalia
for some great package deals. Special shout out to our very own Nexus member and event photographer, Mish. That's at DA-captured, who will be capturing all of the epic moments for that day. We also have the team from Adelaide Townsville will be there with mouth-watering food truck menu and fresh gelato options available for purchase. Cool.
I need to make my way up there.
Fresh gelato.
I like gelato.
Not bad.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm a fan.
Maybe we should get that for our comps down here on the Gold Coast.
We've got Reece Maston coming to ours.
Shout out to Reece Maston. We'll be there front and center so that will be for our Nexus games. That's on the 9th of December at the Burleigh Town Hotel.
After party is also.
Yep. Nexus Christmas party. We're going to be carrying on. We're already at the tavern. We're already at the pub.
Yeah. I organised Reece Maston specifically.
Yep. Josh had a hand in that one. So shout out to Reece Maston.
I didn't.
That'll be great. But yeah, we're talking program hopping today, and just discussions kind of around sticking to a plan. And I think it's kind of, when we're talking program hopping, we'll have a little bit of a definition there. We're talking about, maybe you start a program, you run it for like a week or two, and then you're like, this is not working for me, which a week or two is probably not the best measure of seeing if anything works, especially in a training context. But you then often see a lot of people just going, hey, I'm going to move on to this program, or maybe I'm looking at this Instagram coach and he's running this program. I'm not running that program. He looks like that. Why don't I look like that?
The classic
body dysmorphia again coming through. But
I remember like kicking off way back in the day when I first started. Now, the availability of information at this point in time online, I don't blame people for getting really confused.
Sure.
Genuinely, because there is just so much. Like every second person, you throw a rock on the Gold Coast and there's an online coach ready to sell you a coaching product.
Yeah.
And I think it's an industry that is extremely saturated, heavily saturated. So it's very easy for people to just like get confused by what they're supposed to be doing. It's like, as you said, that person looks a particular way. Oh, I want to look like that. Oh, actually, I want to look like that. Oh, no, this is the person I want to look like. Back in the day, I remember Wilbo started his with I think it was like a Reddit forum or like a bodybuilding forum online or something.
Nice.
My first program I ever ran was a bodybuilding.com program written by Steve Cook.
Yep.
It was this was when I was at university, and it was literally like college bulk or something. So it was like his college bulking program, and I was like, wait, I'm at uni. That's basically college, and I want to bulk.
Yep.
So I just started that, and I remember I've still got the screenshots in my phone.
Pull it up.
In a folder.
Pull it up.
I don't think I've ever deleted them because it's like one of those sentimental things. Workouts. Here we go. 2016, bench press, 4 sets of 5, 85% of 1 RM. Barbell incline bench, 3 sets of 5 to 8, 80 to 85% of 1 RM. Decline dumbbell press, 3 sets of 10 to 12. And then there was military squats. So there was actually no...
Sorry, is this the same day still?
Yeah, so this was the superset. So decline dumbbell press, superset with just body weight military squats.
Okay, yep.
Then you had seated bench press for 3 sets of 12 with a single drop set after every set. Then you had Smith machined low incline bench press using your 12 RM, do max rest, max reps, rest for 15 seconds, repeat for 4 minutes. From there, you had tricep dips, 4 sets of 8 to 10 with a double drop set on final. That was day 1.
At which point do you cry in the fetal position? Does that happen at the end?
Do you want to hear the leg day?
Let's hear the leg day. Bring it up.
Squat, 4 sets of 5, 85% of 1 RM. Front squat, 3 sets of 5 to 8, 80 to 85% of 1 RM. Barbell walking lunge, 3 sets of 10 to 12. Superset with push-ups, 3 sets of 45 seconds. AMRAP, rest 30 seconds. We then go into a Romanian deadlift, 3 sets of 10 to 12 with a single drop set after every. Imagine doing a drop set on RDLs. Imagine. Leg extension, use your 12 RM, do max reps, rest for 15 seconds, repeat for 4 minutes. Followed by calf raises, use your 12 RM, do max reps, rest for 15 seconds, repeat for 4 minutes.
That's a brutal program. We're at day 2.
There was 5 days in that program. 5. And they just kept getting worse and worse. But I've got like a full folder.
Oh, nice. Look at that. It's proper.
Of like so many workouts. Yeah. And I would just go in and whatever didn't hurt, I'd train.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I had a pretty, maybe not as an extreme example as that when I first started training, but it was definitely a lot of, you know, especially in the gym culture that I went to, very commercialized space. It was Muscle Factory back in the day. I think it's an Iron Addicts now. You'd always have a few interesting characters rolling around telling you how to do shit differently or properly, in quotation marks.
It's always the one old dude in the corner.
There's a few of
who
those.
throws his bicep curls and his triceps are
actually
crazy.
I've been saying this one recently because I've had a few people doing some single arm concentration curls, and I remember coming in with my best mate Robbo back in the day, and there's one guy in the corner, right? Of course, it's in the corner in the dumbbell rack, and he's curling and he's doing this hard rep. He's getting his other hand in there to support and to pull it all the way up, and he's struggling. He was there for like 15 seconds doing this rep, and as soon as he got right to the top, he goes in for a little kiss on the bicep.
That is mind-muscle connection if I've ever... He just needs to turn the muscle on.
Just need to activate it, put the brain into the muscle, right?
Yeah, turn it on.
Yeah.
Smooch.
So it's like, there was a lot of, you know, quote-unquote dumb stuff that I did back in the day as well, and funnily enough, developed a lot of tendonitis and those types of injuries, overuse injuries.
I honestly don't think we have enough time in a podcast to go through all the dumb shit we did.
Yes, but the point kind of being is that... you know, there's always the opportunity to look at what other people are doing. A lot of people are always going to have an input, especially at those kinds of gyms and stuff, to how you could be doing your training better. And, you know, back then you probably weren't, like, I wasn't following a program. It was just a little bit of kind of whatever, you know, cowboy kind of style.
So as much as I had that, I wouldn't necessarily say I followed it. Like, I'd just go in and train whatever didn't hurt. Yeah. And I think I was training nearly 7 days a week.
Wow. Yeah.
At that point, because my thought process was, and this is the same way I approached my first bulk, and I've done a chat with George on this before, probably worth revisiting at some point. But I just thought, if the scale's going up, it's a good thing. It's muscle. That's how my first thought process was, and I would just eat. It was disgusting. Same with training. I just thought the more the better. So I just go in like 7 days a week, whatever didn't hurt. Somehow always skipped legs. For the first multiple years.
Yeah.
Just somehow that happened. And then I'd like train with older people that I knew in the gym and stuff, and like mates that would be like, oh, come and do a session with me. And at the time, like, as much as they had really good intentions, like, they didn't really know what they were doing either. Because we just didn't have the availability of the information we have nowadays, and there wasn't like so much structure and education around it and things like that. Whereas like back then it was just, oh yeah, this is this dude's YouTube arm workout I found, so let's do that.
Piana 8 hour work.
I never ever got into that one, but we should do it one day as a joke.
Could be fun if we don't get injured, but you know, and that's a big thing when it comes to, you know, program hopping and having structure and things like that, is that we've always talked about on the podcast that you want to have some sort of plan. Having structure your training makes it a lot easier to measure things and see what is working, what isn't working, but also like you have to do that over time, right?
Yes.
So like the average length of lifespan of the program hoppers is maybe 1 to 2 weeks. And it's like, is it any wonder that you're not really seeing the progress that you want to be seeing?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think there's probably at some point like a couple of mitigating factors that I would almost be like, okay, cool, 1 to 2 weeks is enough to understand. And that would be like from a recoverability standpoint, like, is it feasible within your your work schedule or your life schedule or things like that. You committed to a 6-day push-pull legs split. All of a sudden, those sessions are going for an hour and a half to 2 hours. You don't actually have that much time, or you're like, oh, actually, I don't want to do this. And it's kind of like, okay, cool. Maybe that's somewhat of a valid reason to be like, let's have a look at changing that up. But for the dudes who just be like, oh, no, I'm not gaining enough on this. Let's go to a different one. And then they go to a different coach or they go to a different program or whatever. It's like this option paralysis. You get lost in the world of programming and hopping and YouTube and all of those sort of forums and things like that basically go into that.
Yeah. Well, there's so much, like we said, maybe back in the day, the amount of information was limited to these places like bodybuilding.com and stuff like that. And there was a handful of programs there. Granted as well, maybe not all of them being right for you. Didn't sound like Steve Cook's program was probably the most efficient training program for you at the time.
No, but I guarantee if I'd actually followed it to a T, I would have made some decent progress.
Or at least then your ability to measure how you go in terms of recovery and these types of things.
In saying that, like I read out the one portion of it, like the 85% of one arms and stuff, it did build up to that. So that wasn't just every week it was 85%. It was like,
good.
I think first week was like 65 and then went 70, 75. It did build up to that. I just didn't bother screenshotting like 12 weeks worth of a program. I was just like, oh, okay, I'll do this. So like there was some sort of, I guess you could say, quote unquote, structure to it. I just didn't do that because at the time I didn't know that's, I just thought train to train. Like you just train and you get bigger.
Yeah.
And that's how it works.
Yeah.
And then I got fat. I went from skinny to fat.
So when did you then, like how long did you run that for? And then when was the point that you started to follow something that resembled a little bit more of the correct structure for yourself?
Myself personally. So I would have, I did that for probably 2-3 years. So being mindful, I started in a gym at about 18, 19. So I ran that for a couple of years maybe, and then I started getting a little bit more of the calisthenics stuff. And there was no structure to training with calisthenics. Like it was literally, the boys can meet up on Saturday. We're going to go do a 1,500 rep workout down the bars.
Okay.
Just comprised of nothing but like muscle ups and pull ups and push ups and dips.
How did your joints go with that?
Oh, they were flogged by the end of it. Because I was still trying to do weights on top. I was still trying to do like Cali sessions through the week. I was still trying to do like just so much. I was running at the time. This is when I could run. I was small. I was feeble. I had a really strong pull-up butt and really strong dip.
Sure.
So I didn't really follow any structure through that. And then it wasn't until, would have been when I found the Sebastian Oreb Thor's Power program, probably around 22. So maybe 4 years before I actually found a bit of a structure. And then I followed it to a T. Like everything that was in there, I just swapped out the strongman stuff that was in there, like log press and shit, because I was just like, why would I do that?
Yep.
I don't want to do that.
Didn't align with your goals.
No, but I followed that program to a T. I took my squat from 150 to 200 kilos, my bench from 100 to 140, and my deadlift from 150 to 200.
Right. So
in 12 weeks.
In 12 weeks. Wow.
That was the first time. And I guess because I was like, holy fuck, like I followed this to a T. And look at the progress I made in this 12 weeks.
Yeah.
That was when my brain started really ticking over. And I had another coach at the time, and I said to him, I was like, yeah, I want to do powerlifting. Like, let's do this. And then he pretty much structured programming for me for a bit before I came to Wilbo. And then I've been with Will for three and a half years now.
Yeah. So it's when you started to follow a structured program a little bit more closely, a little bit more precisely, that results really started to kind of flow in at that point.
Yeah. And I kind of looked back and I was like, what the fuck have I done? What have I wasted the first 4 years of training doing?
Yeah. Well, that's something that we, obviously at Nexus and at the gym with a lot of your online clients, it's like obviously we're writing structured programs for them. And there is a degree of modification that comes about due to lifestyle circumstances and changes. And we've got many podcasts on those topics and how we go through those processes. But for the most part, we're making small changes as well, right? We're trying to get as much consistency and structure, particularly when you're looking to overload certain movements. And, that's often a common one that we could talk about just changing exercises too frequently as well in terms of program hopping, that can be a big stunt to your progress, right?
I think even from a coaching perspective, like I can put my hand up straight away and say, I fucked up I used to do that all the time.
Sure.
When I first started as a coach, my thought process was the program needs to be changed every 4 weeks entirely to keep it interesting so people can enjoy it and progress and all this sort of shit.
Shock the muscle.
And now I have to sit there and have the conversation with the client. I'm like, hey, don't be surprised if this program doesn't change for like 12 to 16 weeks. There'll be increases and, we're scaling and bringing things back and rep changes and maybe some slight variations. We might go from pauses to non or non to pauses, etc. in certain exercises. So there is some slight variations, but like if the main base of the structure just stays the same.
So what is your rationale and then reasoning for keeping exercise similar for 12 to 16 weeks as opposed to swapping them maybe every 4?
You can actually get more out of the exercise. There's exercises I've got in my program at the moment, even coming into being 2 weeks out from comp, and I've been doing some of these exercises for the last 12 months, every week.
Yeah.
Haven't swapped them at all.
Yeah.
Because there's still progress to be made in them. There might have been slightly different variations. With our primary, for example, we can load different ranges.
Yeah.
So I think I started loading the bottom, and then for a little bit, Wilbo and me went to loading the bottom and the top, the middle and the top, sorry, and just playing around with the different loading mechanisms. But I got 12 months out of that exercise. And I can still progress it.
Yeah. So there's enough of those changes to keep things fresh enough, because I think we have talked about this on the podcast before, just in terms of doing the same thing for too long and getting, I believe, Juggernaut training systems call it adaptive resistance, right? So you're getting some resistance to the adaptation of doing the same thing over and over again. The body does start to figure out the easiest ways to kind of do the task.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So sometimes we need a few key variation changes, or just even slightly enough to make it hard again, to make it challenging, to get some sort of stimulus out of it. But maybe not just throwing the whole thing out just because progress has started to stall or slow down a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's that's part of the conversation I have with my clients. And this is, we always reiterate back to communication and having that open conversation, is like letting them understand as to why. Because they may come from a place where they think, I have to change exercise every 4 weeks to shock the muscle. And it's kind of like, well, it's not a thing. I understand from your perspective what you mean by that. I really do. This is how we shock the muscle. Progressively overloading that exercise every single week.
Yeah.
As we mentioned, there's going to be variations to that. And yes, absolutely, there's going to be an adaptation at some point where it's like really hard to overload that. We're fortunate enough here that we've got quite a few machines where we can change all the loading parameters on certain things. And, not a lot of people might have access to those types of things in a gym. But something as simple as like you start first block with a close grip cable row. Then you might go to a medium grip. Then you end the last 12 weeks at a wide grip. Now you've had 12 weeks of a cable row exercise. 3 different variants, theoretically targeting slightly different regions of the back, depending on how you look at the training. But it's also enough that it like keeps the mental side of things interesting. Because I do find that that's one thing I need to explain to clients as well, is I'm like, okay, cool. So this is the reasons why we do keep these exercises in there. These are the reasons why we would swap them out. You can't progress them anymore. We've maxed the machine out. We've this, that, and the other. It just becomes unfeasible. Like, if you have to do 30 plus reps to actually get some sort of stimulus because you've just built up to that, that's kind of redundant now for us, for the most part, with what we're trying to achieve. Or if you're bored, like if you go to that exercise and you're like, fuck this, I don't want to do this. Or you skip it. Like I skip exercises after a while and I just say to Will, yeah, this is gone. Like I've swapped it out.
Yeah.
He's like, sweet. I'll push that exercise as long as I can. But if I ever get to a point where I'm just like, and not from a perspective of like, I'm dreading it because it's hard. I'm just like, fuck, I don't want to do this. I'm just bored of this. I'm just bored of this movement. Like, let's change it up.
Yeah.
Sweet. Absolutely not a problem at all.
Yeah.
Because the mental side and the enjoyment of training still needs to be a pretty considerable factor.
100%. You're always going to do get more results out of something that you enjoy doing. But again, it does come back to maybe a little bit of that conversation with the person that you're working with, or even with yourself, as to, it's like, why am I changing it? Is there a good reason for me changing it? Or am I just changing it for the sake of it, right?
Yeah. And I think this is like something that we've had, yourself and myself included, so many conversations since starting and opening this gym with the younger kids.
Yeah.
Because the generation coming through now, as we said, YouTube, Instagram, Reels, TikTok, like they have access to literally the world's best coaches at their fingertips whenever they want. Like it's so easy to find people now. It's also very easy to find programs. It's very easy to find all of that sort of stuff. So having a lot of the younger kids come in and they're just like, oh, I saw Sam Sulek do this. It's like Sam Sulek is a genetic freak that somehow is just adapted into what he is. Or, Chris Bumstead does this. Yeah, Chris Bumstead's been training for a majority of his life, and he's the number one physique competitor in the world.
A lot of the outliers, kind of rise to your, into your field of view, and you kind of then maybe will go, well, why isn't everyone doing this? Or maybe I should be doing this, and it's not necessarily the right line of thinking. And that's something that, we often come back to with some of the younger kids in particular, because they're quite starry-eyed and they're looking at that and be like, why don't I look like that? You know what I mean? And there's many reasons for it, but
shout out Carson. You want to shout out on the podcast, mate? Here it is.
I was doing my best not to name names, but
I don't think it comes from a bad place, because I think Carson's actually a perfect example of someone who came in. He had a perception of training that may not have necessarily been accurate. We helped to provide a basis of education for him, both of us. I know we both spent a lot of time with him. I know he was in silver for a bit. He did some gold with me. Obviously, I live with him now, so
can't get rid of it.
I cop a bunch of questions. And now he's doing coaching with one of the guys from in here, Ollie. And I've watched him smash it. This is a kid who was like, oh, I need to change this, or I need to do this, or I need to change this differently, or maybe I need to do this a little bit differently. And was kind of your perfect quote unquote program hopper. He kind of was just hopping from program to program. And since he has now followed structure to a T, including training and nutrition, all of his lifts have gone up. His physique change has been great. He's making massive progress across the board. And he's genuinely going to be if he continues to keep this up over the long term, he'll be someone that achieves quite a lot of good things.
Sure.
He wants to do bodybuilding, so he's going to achieve a lot of good things within bodybuilding.
Yeah.
But it's just come from the basis of trying to just get it through to him and be like, this is why we do the things we do. This is why we don't hop program to program.
Especially when you're talking in the context of, strength and muscle growth, these things aren't going to happen very quickly. They happen over prolonged periods of time. And if you can just have some patience and knuckle down, work hard, and have that focus on what you need to do in order to achieve the results will come.
Yes.
And it can be quite hard that, maybe you don't see it in that first couple of weeks. You're like, oh, why am I doing this? I need to change something. And you start, making those decisions that don't necessarily serve the long term. And it's kind of that, maybe search for that kind of instant gratification of results, or maybe you just want to share it on Instagram or TikTok and be like, hey, I'm doing this too, you know what I mean, or whatever.
Yeah, in a world full of TikTok, instant dopamine, instant gratification, likes, love, heart, all of this bullshit that people seek and chase, and almost that external validation, it's hard to be like, oh, I've kept the same weight on this exercise for 3 weeks. I can't post that. People are going to be like, oh, that's not good. You should be progressing that. You should be changing that. Obviously, there's so many different ways that we can go into progressive overload, and I'm sure we've done podcasts on it before, so we won't dive into it heavily today. But it's not always about how much weight you add to the bar every week or to the thing every week, and I guess it can be hard to see it. And I see it a lot more, I guess, from the powerlifting perspective, because there's a lot of people who spend their off-season doing exercises and following a program that's so far away from the specific SBD lifts that we do, and that's what we're marked on in a competition. And they can become a little bit cloudy, and they're like, oh man, I just don't think this is going to pay off. I don't think this is really going to be the exercise that works for me. And I was always like, I never want to be the coach. It's like, just trust the process, follow the plan, follow the program, listen to me. I want to try and educate and help them to understand as to why we do things. But until they actually get to see the results, it can be very hard. And I guess that's where we come into, from the coaching perspective, with keeping them on track with maybe setting different goals. Yep. So they might be doing SSB.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So this is your 1RM squat. This is your SSB squat. We want to go to this 1RM squat. All right, well, theoretically, if we progress your SSB to a decent point, this goal here will set, then we know for a fact we've built muscle. We've gotten better at the skill. We've adapted. So by the time that we go back to then peaking the squat, it's like, oh, hang on a second. I've added 10, 20 kilos to my squat since the last prep. This is great. This is the greatest thing in the world. I fucking love this. And then they're happy.
It's kind of like the, it very rings true to the name of the realization phase. You start to realize and actually see that all the work that you've been doing under the hood has now come to the surface and manifested in the results that you wanted, a little bit more specifically in the target.
That's
right?
definitely from a more strength-based perspective.
Sure.
I guess the bodybuilding equivalent would be when they cut.
Yep.
So they do their cut, they see how their body looks, do their bulking phase, eventually do a cut again, see what sort of adaptations they've made and changes they've made and things like that. So I guess that's probably their equivalent.
Yeah, and you're measuring that over a prolonged period of time. It's not something that you are measuring week to week. It's like when you're looking in the mirror and you're trying to check out your progress and stuff, and sometimes you don't even notice a difference. You
see yourself every day.
You see yourself every day. It looks the same, blah, blah, blah. And then you look at a photo from like 6 to 12 weeks ago or something. You're like, oh, I can actually see some tangible changes and differences here when you look at those side by side. But day to day in the mirror, you're like, fuck, I look the same.
Well, that's why we measure and track training at the end of the day. Like, that's why we keep that consistent. That's why we track it. That's why we use the apps now. Previously, we were using spreadsheets where everything would be tracked, from sleep, water intake, their nutrition for the week, how they're feeling day to day, session to session, their weights they've lifted, the RPEs of those weights, comments about, that felt good, this felt harder, this blah, 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 change that, do this, whatever that might be. But having that written out and tracked, you can physically see, okay, cool. So block 1, I was doing 10 kilo dumbbell curls. Okay, cool. We're now 20 weeks later, I'm at 17.5 kilos for the same reps.
Yep. That's huge.
That's probably a pretty quick progression. That's 7.5 kilos. Maybe dumbbell curl. Man, I'm just at the 20s.
Yeah.
I've been training for nearly 10 years.
How long have you been doing those bicep curls?
Oh, not often. I'd maybe at the moment like once a week if I feel up to it.
Okay. Yep. Maybe not a
so
great
not
example.
not a great example for myself.
What about lateral raises? You've been doing those forever.
Yeah, 25s.
25s.
Sets of 15.
Not bad.
Pretty happy with those.
Yeah.
But I've also been doing lateral raises. Is like a lateral raise for me would be the number one most consistent exercise I've done since the start.
There you go.
Without a doubt.
Get some width on those shoulders.
Yeah. That's why I have no chest. It's all dealt.
Yeah. I was going to bring it back to, because I had this thought recently as well, because we have talked shocking the muscle, and that's a bit of it's probably not as much talked about these days and stuff, but people still apply that within, certain training regiments and certain gyms and things like that, where it's like they are constantly kind of changing things. And there is an element of truth to these things always, and you kind of maybe just have to dig a little bit more under the surface, because I kind of think about the rule of adaptive resistance and doing the same thing for so long, but then also just having an element of variation. Maybe it is from a tempo or pause perspective, maybe some of these loading changes or parameters we've been talking about, a narrow grip to a wider grip or something.
Yep.
Making those small changes adds an element of novelty to the exercise. Like when you add barbell RDLs back into your program and you haven't done them for a while, you do one set and you're absolutely fried and cooked, right? There's an element of shocking the muscle that kind of comes true there, where it's like the new novelty of that exercise. There's a lot of, stimulation and particularly soreness that will probably come from doing that exercise if you're doing it hard and heavy enough, right? That it's like, okay, you can kind of see where that came from, that, if I change this exercise, I actually got great results from only doing a small amount of work. But we know that over time, as you start to overload and progress that, you're going to need more and more work, more and more.
Yes.
But it's just kind of like, it was just interesting to think about that term of shocking the muscle and then applying that a little bit more to, strength training principles of the novelty of changing exercise. And there's certain times where you do that. Like I'm running a new program that we sat down and put together last week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a little bit more of an intro week because I have a couple new movements, a bit of a different format. I didn't need to do the most amount of work on week 1.
No.
Because I did a couple of sets of hamstring curl. I did it really focused, pushing my glutes in, absolutely fried my hamstrings.
Perfect. Yep.
And I didn't need to do a crazy amount of work and volume to do it. But over time, I'm going to stick with that for a long period of time because I'm going to need more each week that I successively do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I guess, like even, if we think a couple of weeks' time, I'll be done comp. Already I'm starting to sit down and structure a little bit of a post-comp program just because it keeps my mind, okay, cool, what's, where are we headed? Like there's light at the end of the tunnel. I say that from a really positive place. Can't wait for comp. But for me, it's one of those things that's like, okay, I know that, I am going to add things like RDLs and some exercises that are going to put me through a bit more range and things like that as well. Throw back in some unilateral drills, so some lunges and things like that. I know for me, for probably the first 4 to 8 weeks, 2 sets is going to be enough.
Sure. Yep.
2 sets of RDLs. I've gone from 0 sets of RDLs for the last probably 12, 16, maybe even 20 weeks. I can't remember the last time I did them. So 2 sets to start us off is definitely going to be enough. Like, I'm going to get a decent amount of stimulus out of that. I'm going to be able to add, if I start with RPE, around an RPE 6, couple of sets of 8 to 12 or something like that, like just in a comfortable range, push them pretty hard. I know for a fact that like the first probably 2 to 3 weeks, I'll get considerable amount of DOMs from them just because it's an exercise I haven't done in so long. And then for me, it'll be like week 4 will be where I can really start to sort of push it a little bit harder. And then I'll get another 4 weeks of like being able to push that really hard, where I'll get to a point where it's like, well, feasibly, do I really want to add more load to this? Could I do it? Probably. Is it going to fry me? Probably. So let's just throw a 3rd set.
Yep.
And then dial it back a little bit again and then continue to progress that. And I can keep that cycle running for the next 6 to 12 months if I really want.
Sure. It's just that manipulation of those training variables, volume, intensity, frequency. We've done a lot of podcasts on that as well. Especially coming out of something like comp rep where you're doing considerably low volume, but at a high intensity.
Yeah. I don't really get DOMs at the moment at all.
No. But if you throw in a set of 8 to 12 RDLs,
I'm going to be fucked.
You'll be cooked.
Yeah. 100%. And that's what I don't get DOMs at the moment because everything's singles. And my body's fairly well adapted to it. Like, fatigued wise, I'm very fatigued.
Yeah.
But I don't really get DOMs. Like, it's not as if I'm pushing my body to a point of failure where it's like, oh, we need to rebuild and all this sort of stuff. Because that's just not the current phase of training that it is. But as soon as I do go to aim back up in those rep ranges of 8s to 12s, and that's across the board on all exercises, like, I know the first week after comp, I just play around and have some fun. Then the second week, I just sort of will start an intro week as well. So I'm pretty cruisy. I'm going to go from 4 to 6 days of training a week. So that's a considerable volume increase in itself. I don't need much volume, and I'm going to get a decent amount of stimulus out of all of it.
Yep.
If we look at it from a perspective of like training, at the end of the day, you can have the world's best program, but intensity remains king.
Sure. Yeah.
Take the couple of sets and push them. As you said, you did a couple of sets of hamstring curl. You locked in. You focused on the movement. You really drove hard. Like, your intensity was high. So that's all that you needed. Like, if you can be intense for 2 sets and really push yourself to failure, or as close to failure as possible, like, you'll get a decent stimulus out of that.
Yeah. I'm going to be walking funny for the next couple of days for sure.
Yeah. Sweet.
Perfect. So we'll talk about like maybe what defines then a good program, and like even just in terms of then exercise lifespan, because in terms of program hopping, we're talking about maybe changing things a little bit too frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that in the context of maybe some compound versus isolation, and how long maybe an exercise should be in a program for. We kind of did touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, as long as it needs.
As long as it needs to.
Yep.
Yeah.
As long as they're still able to be progressed in some meaningful, tangible capacity, and you still enjoy the exercise.
Yeah. So from the psychological perspective.
Psychological perspective is just as important, I think.
Yeah. So the difference.
In saying that, though, don't just hate an exercise in 3 weeks just because you go, oh, I want to change it up.
Yeah.
Ride the wave a little bit. Push yourself.
I've often found that with pushing a couple of guys into particularly some frontal plane movements, being a very sagittal plane forward and back, up and down orientated gym. Sometimes there's a little bit of resistance for people moving outside of that plane and doing some. I know whenever I give transverse stuff to Miles, he's like, why am I doing this shit? You know what I mean? It's like
bloody Miles.
Yeah, well, you're doing it to keep yourself healthy and get some variation and all those things that we discussed. But particularly that, most people will be like, I'm over it. They're over it already in the first 2 weeks. It's like, give the thing a chance, maybe spend a little bit more time with it.
The other thing is too, is like they might do it for 4 to 8 weeks and then kind of like hit a little bit of a plateau. But what they don't realize is if we're going to look at juggernaut systems and things like that with like relation to maximum recoverable volume and the way in which things like our fatigue and our systemic fatigue and everything like that sort of is on just a continuum.
Yeah.
So sometimes fatigue goes up and our exercise potential slightly comes down.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden we bring down and, you might hit a plateau for a couple of weeks with an exercise and you're like, fuck this. Why am I going to keep doing this? It's shit.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you may take a couple of days off. We run a deload. Fatigue comes down. All of a sudden, you've added another 10 kilos to that exercise, and it's the fucking greatest thing in the world again. You're like, oh, this is sick. Actually, I love this exercise.
Put
like
it on TikTok. Everyone should be doing this exercise.
I'm keeping this in forever.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, ride that wave. Like, don't just hit the first little speed bump and be like, you know what? I'm actually just going to pack it up and go home now.
Throw the whole thing out. Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity, but I'm calling it a day. And you're just like,
yeah. And there's also a difference there between, like I find in particular, programming compounds versus isolation movements. I find that the more isolated stuff and smaller muscle groups like your biceps, your triceps, your delts and things like that, you could probably move those around a little bit more frequently. Whereas some of the compounds and stuff, especially if we're making these modifications, you'll probably be keeping these programs, keeping them in your program for a lot longer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't want to be hated for saying this, but if we look at biceps and triceps, for example, even side delts, lateral raises, anything that's essentially flexing the forearm, i.e. a bicep bias movement, they're all pretty similar. Like, you've got your two bicep heads and a couple of different forearm muscles and things like that. But they're all pretty fucking similar.
Yeah.
Whether you do your curls on the cables or with a single dumbbell or with two dumbbells or with an easy bar or with, I don't know, they're all fairly similar. Like, it's not too many variations in them. Same with triceps. If you're pushing down, there's only so many ways you can press down.
Sure.
Like, it's very fucking similar.
Yeah.
Yes, there's definitely variations and things like that. Don't come at me in the comments. Only positive feedback. But
send it to his DMs.
Don't do that. I'll just ignore it, and then I'm going to look like a dick. But there's probably one thing that I do agree that Sam Sulek does say, and that's literally, it is exactly that. Is like, if you want to do a tricep-based movement, and you roll in and maybe tricep press downs aren't feeling great on the elbows today, but all of a sudden you can go and do a skull crusher or something. Well, why would you try and push through something that's hurting just because it's on the program when you could go and get a really decent amount of stimulus out of another exercise that's fairly similar?
Yeah.
You're still working your tricep.
Yeah. It's a fair point. Like, I think is, the key thing.
On those little isolation exercises.
Sure. Yeah.
If you're at a point where you're doing SBD and your deadlifts are feeling a bit shit for the day, don't pack it up and go and do like a hip thrust.
Yeah, or maybe the difference between something like a chest-supported row and an unsupported barbell row, that can be very different movements from a fatigue standpoint.
Absolutely, yeah. So those would probably be where I'd start to draw the line a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it purely from an isolation perspective.
Yeah. And
biceps, triceps.
Yeah. At the end of the day, just work hard on those exercises.
Yeah.
Maybe don't change them every single week.
Yeah, run them for a while.
But there is a couple of considerations there and minutiae to be discussed for sure. And that's kind of that's the other note that we had there of just the RPE or the intensity that you're having for some of these movements. And, for the isolation stuff, you probably need to just be working hard on them. RPEs 9 to 10, do a couple of AMRAPs, things like that.
For the most part, and call this lazy programming if you want. For a majority of my clients, I know they're not doing true RPE 10s or true AMRAPs. I'll keep a majority of their accessory stuff as 3x AMRAP. George was actually George's nutrition coach, George, was probably a really great example of this, is that I kind of wanted to take her, she thinks too much when she does things.
Yep.
And she doesn't understand RPE. Much as I try and explain it to her, she hates it.
Okay. Proper call out here.
No, this is a good thing.
Okay. Yep.
Because it was an experiment. I know what I'm doing with coaching. But it was more or less, I was like, okay, cool. You know what? I am done programming 3x10 to 12 at RPE 9 for you. It's just, you don't do it.
Right.
3 times AMRAP.
Okay.
Go.
Yep.
And she fucking goes.
Yep.
And she's grown massively. She's still in the same weight class, but she's filled it out more in the last year than she has in the last probably 2 to 3 years. She's progressed her squat. I think at the moment we're 4 kilos over and she's done it for a double.
Yep.
So her best squat in comp was 126.
Yep.
Or 122, sorry. And her best squat ever was 126. And now she's squatted 127 for a double, 130 for a single.
Yep.
Her deadlift has gone through the roof. Her bench is gone through the roof. Like, she's benching 60 kilos every day. Extended pauses, close grip, normal. Whereas last year she wasn't touching 60 kilos.
Yep.
Couldn't even touch it.
Yep.
And the only difference is I've kept majority of the main SBD work fairly similar. I've progressed that in RPEs and each week and things like that. I do weights for her just because it's easier. But her accessory shit, I'm like, go hard.
Yep.
Just go hard.
Yep.
And she's still been progressing it every week. Like someone might look at it and be like, oh, 3 times AMRAP at a 10. Oh, I can't progress that next week. It's like, well, you probably can. You know, if this week you got 15, 14, 12, well, next week do 15, 15, 13. 15, 15, 14. Cool. Okay, you've got that weight to this.
Yeah.
And I'll generally still try and put a little bit of a rep range, just so it's not like, okay, I want you to go until you do 35 reps. Becomes redundant at that point.
Yeah. She wouldn't be doing a lot of productive coaching if she can't use her arms.
Exactly. So, like, obviously, as we always say, there's little caveats and things like that, the little minutiae, but it's just something to be mindful of for people.
There's also just a reminder in there as well that if you have that data sitting there of I did 15, I did 13, I did 12, if you're week to week looking that in your program, you just set yourself those little progress goals along the way as well of like, okay, this week I'm going to just get one more rep on each set or something like that, or first one can stay to 15. I'll try and get them all to 15. And then when I've got them all at 15, maybe that's a good time to take up the weight and work back down to the rep range.
That's pretty much what I'll do with every client for their accessory stuff.
Yeah.
Rep ranges.
Yeah.
There's very few times, besides SBD work specifically, there's very few times I'll set 3 by 10 or anything along those lines. It'll always be a rep range.
Yeah. Just there's a bit of wiggle room. And
as I said, there's more than one way to progress.
For sure. Yeah.
Keep the same weight for 4 weeks in a row.
Yep.
But if you've taken that weight 3 by 8 and now you're getting 3 by 12 and it's actually easier than week 1.
Yep.
That's fucking huge progress. That's massive.
Especially if your technique got a little bit better as well. You know, that's often a reason why we'll keep guys at the same weights for weeks in a row is just, okay, let's just clean it up. Let's get a little bit tidier next week. And then we'll maybe add a rep and we'll add a little bit here and a little bit there. And all of that works up to, you know, a lot over time.
Yes. Yeah. I had one of my clients, I think for 5 weeks, you know, comp prep, we had her doing the exact same weight on bench.
Yeah.
Every single week for a single.
Yeah.
Until it just, and week 1 was tough.
Yeah.
Then it got a little bit better.
Yeah.
Then it got a little bit better. Then all of a sudden she's not scared of that weight anymore. So it got a little bit better.
Yeah.
And then by week 5, it's moving like an opener.
Perfect.
And it was the previous one I rep. You're like, perfect. All right, cool. Now let's go.
Yeah.
Now we can bump it up a bit more. And then we did the same thing for a couple of weeks and we just keep doing that.
Yeah.
Progress massively.
Yeah. So yeah, just, you know, and it always comes back to this on pretty much all of our podcasts on programming, on coaching and all this stuff. You know, having yourself a good plan, having a few goals, longer term, shorter term, progress goals and things like that, stuff that you can measure over time to be as consistent as possible, because that is where your best results will be every day, right?
Say it all the time, but training is just a percentage of averages.
Yeah.
That's all it is over the long term.
Yeah.
And that was a quote that stuck with me from Brendan Kempter. And if nobody knows who Brendan Kempter is, he's probably arguably one of the best natural bodybuilders in Australia. He's also probably one of the most psychotic trainees in the world.
Yeah.
Like, if you ever want to watch a guy push himself, and there are people who train with him, both natural and not natural, who say he trains harder than anyone they've ever met. I've never seen a dude who will sit in his garage on his own, push himself so fucking hard every single time without failure. And then he'll post the video and it looks like an RP 30. And he's like, oh, no, I can definitely see I had at least one more. I'm like, brother, where? Where are you getting that extra one? And I messaged him one day because he was training with a training partner. And this is definitely a conversation we've had before where, you know, training with a training partner, you tend to push a little bit harder. It's just that little bit of friendly competition. You've got someone there to cheer you, spot you, help you out. And I was just like, man, you know, how do you, if you do a session like this today, how are you then going to progress on this next week? And I've had it before where I've done a session with a friend and then I'm like, fuck, how am I meant to progress that? Like, I don't have the same mental capacity that I did then. I didn't have the same sort of stimulus. I wasn't as hyped. I wasn't as happy, whatever that situation might be. And he just straight up said, he's like, man, training is just a percentage of averages over the long term. Yeah. That's it. One amazing session realistically doesn't mean shit in the long term.
Yeah.
Just as one bad session doesn't mean shit in the long term.
Very true.
It's all how you are consistently.
Yeah. So
he said, you know what? This might have been one of the best sessions I've had this month, but all my other sessions have still been pretty bloody good. Yeah. And that's all that matters. Well, I was like, fuck, I love that. That's a
great way
sick.
Of looking at it. And like that's a little maybe then highlight as well of the highlights that you do see on Instagram as well. Like, because you will always see that and you're like, wow, this guy did this or he did that. And it's like, but what else has he done? And what happens behind the scenes? And all the stuff that he didn't post. All of that is not nothing. It's definitely not nothing. And like you said, you know, it's more of those averages over time than it is any one particular time, moment, or session. So something to keep in mind, especially for those younger kids coming through at the moment.
Yeah. I think, honestly, the takeaway message from this is keep consistent.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to stick things out.
Yep. And also, maybe at the end of the day as well, that if things really aren't working and you have a very good reason to change something and move it out, as long as you have a good reason for it and you're not just doing it for the sake of it or because someone else did it.
Yeah. Or talk to your coach.
DM for coaching.
We have coaching available.
We have coaching available. Cool. We'll
Perfect.
leave it there.
I reckon we wrap it up. Done.
Thank you for listening to the Nexus Unloaded podcast. Be sure to jump on our website to find details on everything mentioned in the podcast today, plus information on our coaching, mentoring, and gyms based in the Gold Coast and Townsville. Make sure you follow us on our Instagram for any updates on what we are currently doing, and we'll see you all in the next episode.